So I'm going to move on to introduce the last speaker of Business Day before lunch, and then there will be two very important speakers directly after lunch as well. As you can see, we're running out of time because we always do this. Next speaker I want to introduce you to, I was just talking to Doug backstage, and Doug was saying, you know, it's really quite a decision to start Business Day with the issues from OPEC and one of the great energy giants. And this is very deliberate on our part. David and I believe, and frankly it's obvious, we believe very strongly that all of the problems that you guys face, that the world faces, needs everybody in it fixing everything together. So there is no point in having just a tiny little group of businesses, no energy, no tech, no all sorts of things. These are the companies that you have to engage with to change the world. So a very important thing. Now, our next speaker is Graham Sweeney. Graham is the Chief Executive Officer of the Zero Emissions Platform. Now, you heard Martin from Shell earlier mention the Zero Emissions Platform, and he mentioned carbon capture, or they're called CCS, carbon capture and storage. And I know that those of you in the room who are serious environmentalists know about this stuff. What I didn't know when we went into Summit last year was the number of partners who are on the ZEP, which is what the insiders call the Zero Emissions Platform. It quite literally is every major energy producer in the world, whether it's natural gas, whether it's pet fuel, whether it's nuclear. All of these big energy giants are involved in the Zero Emissions Platform. Now, it's not for us here at One Young World to propose Zero Emissions Platform or carbon capture and storage to you as a solution. Frankly, you know, we have no right to do that, and we don't. However, we believe that you guys need as much exposure as young as possible to all kinds of issues and solutions. So when those of you who go out into the world to lead companies, to lead your countries and change the world, you need to know who all the players are and everything that's going on. Graham Sweeney himself has been a stalwart and a supporter of One Young World from the early days, when lots of companies and lots of groups were saying to us, we don't really care what young people think. Graham was one of the ones who said, if there's a solution out there to the impact of climate change, to the energy crisis, it's going to be young people who are going to get it together and do it. So would you please welcome a supporter of yours, Graham Sweeney, from the Zero Emissions Platform. Graham.
Good morning. So it was hot up there in the quarantine area, and it's even hotter down here. My name is Graham Sweeney. It's a privilege to be with you. I was with you last year, and even more importantly, I've got two folk up here to do the real work here this morning, and that's Mary and Daniel, and they're going to talk to you about some of their perspectives. You know that I work for Royal Dutch Shell in addition to chairing the platform, and I'll be happy to take questions which relate to both activities as we get to the end of it. So I have about 30 years of experience. I used to be an astrophysicist, but I gave that up. It didn't pay the rent. And I went into the oil business, and I've done a lot of work, in particular also work around sustainable energy systems over a long period of time. Did a lot of work on hydrogen in the 1990s. But one of the things that's clear is whether you think it's an evolution or a revolution isn't the point here. The way in which we built this energy system has to change. The core reason that it's got to change is because it's essential, but it has that long-term legacy liability that needs to be managed. So the core message in here is that it's energy that drives welfare and eliminates poverty. You've seen that it's not only a poverty issue, but it's a gender issue. So we have to fix this so that that works, and that will be a primary driver. At the same time, we know that the current mix of energy creates a legacy in emissions which makes it highly likely that we'll suffer substantial climate change. folks like to dramatize this a bit, don't they? They say the fate of the planet is at risk here. Well, I got some good news. Planet's going to be just fine. The issue is us and our relationship with it and our economic well-being. Move to the next slide. So the point is at the end that we need to keep the temperature rise below 2 degrees C. This seems to be kind of a weak sort of aspiration, doesn't it? And it's hard to imagine why you would want to do this. I think it's much better to think about it this way. What happens as the emissions rise and the greenhouse effect takes place is that those folk who have too much water get more. They get it catastrophically and in large amounts in small time. And those who don't have any get less. We built the whole economic system around access to those waterways, and the changes in sea level will be quite significant and devastating. So we need to be able to build more energy and have a limited impact on the climate. So the question is, what is the fastest and the most economic way in order to achieve those sorts of things? Go to the next slide. The key point is up from 7 to 9 billion people. That's a lot of folk. A lot of folk already in some form of poverty in any event, and all of that needs to get fixed. So I reckon at least a 50% rise over the next 20 years and possibly a doubling of the call by 2050. So that's the size of the challenge in terms of the supply end. I figured that that is a huge task. That means we have to build in the next 30 years a system that's the same size as the one we took 100 years to build before. Go to the next slide. So the point is that today, about 80% of the system is from fossil fuels. The issue here, as we know, is that it's taken 40 years to build each of the changes that have occurred, that it takes about 40 years to get to 1% of the global energy system, whatever your energy system is. So it isn't about whether or not this energy is better than that energy. My underlying proposition is that if we don't use all of the energy systems that are available to us, we will not be able to meet that growth in demand. So this is not about ors. Too much, particularly in Europe and North America, of the political conversation is cast in, I am in favor of this and I am against that. This is a much more complex story. This is an and. This is an and at a time when interest in it is waning, and yet the consequences of it become firmer rooted in the science. So this is about energy efficiency, absolutely. But it's about the coexistence of a supply system that will still have 50% of that energy to provide welfare delivered from fossil fuels in 2050. How can that be done? And make sure that we have a reduction in the emissions. It will be, of course, a huge transition to renewables. For those who like it, there will be substantial changes to nuclear. There will still be a key role for coal in 2050 as a result of the manner in which it alleviates at low cost energy poverty. All of these things need to be added up and brought together. One of the things that can make this system work is the introduction of CO2 capture and storage from those fossil energy systems to make them climate friendly so that they can meet this increase in the demand for energy for welfare. So that's the fundamental story. It's an important issue. At the end of this morning, we want to issue a challenge to you and ask you some questions. But before we do that, I'd like to hand over to Daniel.
So if we are to meet our climate change targets, we need to slash down our CO2 emission, the carbon dioxide emissions, by 50% by 2050. Now, how much is that going to cost? More than $300 trillion is the estimate of the International Energy Agency. Now, skeptics would tell you that this is only a cost. But is that true? Isn't it more of an investment into ourselves, our own future, and our relationship to our planet? What do we gain? Jobs, new skill sets, expertise, and the opportunity to create a sustainable energy system. So either way, cost or investment, we have to decide and move faster. Every year of delay in the global action against climate change is going to add $500 billion to the investment necessary till 2030. So we really need to ask ourselves, and you need to ask yourselves, is a huge investment into technology and infrastructure to mitigate climate change only a cost? Is it a provider of jobs, of new sectors, or is it both? Is it maybe something that might move business and jobs from unsustainable economic branches to more sustainable ones? What do you think, Mary?
So I'm Mary. I'm a PhD student in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at Princeton University. And to address Daniel's question, maybe take a step back and think about, well, what do we know about climate change? And what do we care about? Given current economic conditions, and we're losing jobs and so forth, we stop caring about climate change. In fact, we stop believing in it. For instance, look at Germany, for instance. 42% of people there believe in climate change. That's down from 62% in 2006. So since 2006, we had the financial crisis. In the UK, for example, it's 26%, down from 41% in 2009. So maybe it's not just the economic downturn. Maybe it's skepticism, fatigue, or we may just not know enough about the facts and the figures to make good decisions. And the result of it is that we know less, so we believe in climate change less, which is kind of abstract for us now. And what that means is that when we're faced with climate change, we're going to blame others, or we don't want to take responsibility for it, and competing values comes into play. But we're all involved in it, and so that we all need to get together and have to do something about it now. It's about valuing the future, and that should be a universal value. So it all comes down to one real question. Do we, the general public, know enough to make informed decisions on climate change? Graham?
Thanks, Mary. So, a lot of questions. So, our first question on energy is, do you believe a portfolio of low-carbon technologies is necessary to tackle climate change? Because that determines the sorts of actions you may want to take. Second one is, what do you believe is the fastest way for us to bring down emissions? And the third was, what about the costs? These are large investments, of course, in infrastructure and technologies to combat climate change. Is it just a cost? Is it a provider of jobs, new sectors, both? Is the clean race real? And the public awareness issue. Will we have permission to make the changes that are required? Do we know enough in order to be able to say that we would like to see the money spent on this, and if so, why? So that's the picture as we see it, and we want to open this up for a conversation with yourselves. And we're expecting, as if by magic.
Now, normally you would expect me to come to you to ask your questions. This time, we're going to do it differently, because we're going to go right into your questions to the audience. So before you sort of take your place at the microphones, just listen to the questions first, and then see whether you are the one who wants to answer it.
So we've actually already asked them the questions.
Okay,
so
anybody who wants to answer one of the questions from his or her perspective. There's a young man over there, so please kick off and tell us which of the questions that you would like to address.
Hi, my name is Umar and I'm from South Africa. I'd like to address the first question. Yes, South Africa! I'd like to address the first question, but actually with a question. I agree that we need a portfolio of low-carbon technologies, and we need to address carbon emissions. It certainly is necessary, but I don't think it's sufficient. What else do we need to do? If one volcano can release as much carbon dioxide as we have for a large number of years, then certainly it can't be sufficient just to reduce our carbon emissions. What else is there that we need to do?
Should we take them as they're asked?
I think in this case you should.
Yeah, okay. So at least I think from our point of view, this is about accepting that there are a number of constraints on how you can do things. It's the question of what sustainability means for you in the way in which you operate. And what are the trade-offs and the compromises? These are always hard questions, you know. So how much of this would you give up? I mean, look at me, yeah? So I should be 60 next year. So I stole all the family silver, and I've already sold it. You guys have to re-earn all of that. Pension ages are going out. Whilst it was clearly a period of unprecedented growth, it's left a lot of difficulties which will have to be managed. I think there's a lot to be asked about how we integrate our lifestyles into the way in which we operate the whole of society. But at the same time, we can't do that by denying folk access to the energy systems.
Thank you. The next answer comes from here, and then the lady will put forward her answer.
Okay, here Gabriel from Mexico. I would like to answer the second question about what we believe in if it is the faster way to bring down the emissions. I definitely believe that it has to be based on education of ourselves and our people around us, believing that we have to use less energy and it doesn't have to translate in losses for companies, but rather to that it will be a new opportunity for companies, instead of producing more energy, to transfer that energy that a lot of people is not using, transfer to areas where it's not being used, for example, Africa or something like that. So it will be decreased if the population from USA use less energy, because if we change ourselves, and we believe that people next to us will change also, then it will be an international impact. So if USA or any developed country can use less energy, companies will be interested in investment on transfer that energy which is not used into countries where it could be used. So it's actually a win-win. So that's my idea.
I agree.
Gabriel.
Conservation has to be the key play. I think the difficulty is that it's not enough to solve the whole equation. So we will need things in addition to it, but without it, it doesn't work. Absolutely right.
The young lady with her answer.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, so yeah. I'd like to answer the last one. And I come from the United States. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And one of the things I notice is that I do not think that the public, at least in my country, knows enough about climate change to make informed decisions. And I really do blame this a lot on our politicians for spreading a lot of misinformation and creating a lot of doubt in the public's mind about whether climate change is real and what we can do about it. And I think that you brought up some really good points about combating climate change being important not just for the environment, but also for job creation and investment. And I just want to know what you say to people when they deny that climate change is happening, or when they deny that these things are going on, and how you can pad that on a political level so that the public does have good information.
Thank you for your statement and your answer and your question.
Mary, do you want to have a go at that?
I think it's a very tough question. I think, well, personally, you have to start somewhere. And one of the things I'm working on is trying to start from a grassroots approach. And for instance, I myself am involved in this, and even my friends and family don't know exactly what I do or what I believe in. So I think we need to approach it from very different angles, and from just the grassroots, but also through other, like, media and so forth.
Quick question, answer from this side.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Leslie Masibi from South Africa. I'd like to answer the question based on cost. I think primarily depends on where you are coming from in answering that question. And I'd like to speak with regards to Africa. I think we need to look at what was said earlier, that inevitably when there is development, there will be increased energy demands. And as the case of Africa, where we are seeing growth coming up, that means that there'll be need for energy inputs. And as such, we have not developed the necessary technology that can produce cleaner energies. And that is going to be sort of a prerequisite for us to be able to move forward. So as in all essence, I think that is going to be a cost for Africa to develop the technology when there are other pressing socio-economic issues which we need to invest in.
Thank you very much. Quick answer, or shall we have, I presume, another question from the same continent?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great. My name is Calvin. I'm from Kenya. I want to answer the question, just what my brother said in question 3, based on the cost. I don't think, I think we need, especially in Africa, I'm going to talk basically in Africa, and especially in Kenya. You know, we know that climate is a global thing, and I know as Africa, we really don't have the real technology to do that. So I think we need to have huge investment, especially in Africa, so that we can be able to combat the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your suggestion. Maybe the young lady would like to supplement that.
My name is Mariana. I'm from Brazil. I've been studying the carbon market for a few years. So I think I'm going to respond to the second question, which is about the cost. I think who pollutes must pay, but sometimes it causes distortions, because when you pay, you feel free to pollute, so to make a pollution. So as the people from Africa are saying, they have to make a pollution because they don't have another choice. But it has to be an average between who pays and who can make a pollution and who really has to pay. And I think sometimes there's a distortion, because when you pay, you feel free to pollute, to make a pollution.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more answers, one from the right side of the audience, one from the left side of the audience, and that will be it, because I think you all want to have lunch at one point.
Okay, good morning, Ricardo from Nicaragua. Complementing to what she said, I think it's extremely difficult. If I'm an idealist, I would implement a tax or a way to really charge the cost of fuels, right? All that environmental damage they're making. And in that sense, people would not be able to afford using the car so much, so they will look for alternatives. And then also new technologies, green technologies, will not seem as costly, because fuel will be more expensive. But that requires political and also governmental, obviously, and also the corporations to be in charge. And unfortunately, you know that they're not interested, because there's no profit for them, right?
Last answer.
Hello, my name is Brian from the United States of America, and I believe that, yes, a portfolio of low-carbon technologies is definitely required, but I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think nuclear power is part of that, should be part of that portfolio?
Okay, that opens up the next half an hour, but we don't have that.
Well, we could do it quickly. I think the point on nuclear is that you're going to take a view of it. And for me, it's less a conversation about whether nuclear is a valuable part of a low-carbon energy mix, and more a conversation about what conditions would you set for sustainability. So me, personally, I marched against nuclear in the 60s. I changed my mind. I think it's an essential part of the mix, but I respect and understand that there will be places where that's not politically achievable for a wide variety of reasons. That seems to me to be part of what will happen here. I take this point about costs. We've got to drive the costs of these solution sets down. This means we need to have focused programs to deliver technology programs, probably in a collaborative mode that we haven't seen before. I also agree that we've got to get clarity on the costs of the emissions. And for that, I would at least favour a clear carbon market with clear pricing to go into all of it. I just wanted to also pick up the story about what do you say to people who are deniers of all of this. I think part of what we've done in the climate change group is we confronted people and we made them feel bad about who they were and what they had done as a result of the way in which we articulated the problem. We need to move to a more win-win related process. Conservation of energy is a win for everybody. It reduces your costs. We need to move to spaces where people can see jobs and growth, as we said in the things, coming out of that story so that it makes sense. I mean, the folk from Brazil have a great story around the sugarcane ethanol. All of this, I think, is clear. And there is an opportunity to line up the corporate intentions with the needs of society in these kinds of collaborative modes. You may not get everybody, but you'll at least get some of the people. So one of the things that we really wanted to get from you guys is, given this is a grand challenge, it's a challenge which is declining in the public interest, and yet it remains critical, particularly also for your longer-term futures. Because it's important to try to answer this set of questions in more than this kind of short debate. Is there enough enthusiasm in this room for you to set up your own knowledge center on energy and climate change, to make that available in the United States and in other places, to use this platform to make this one of the things that you do, to create that opportunity for leadership? We'd like you to think about this over the conference, and we'd be delighted to help you to set this up if you choose to do it. Thanks very much for your time.